Amen, and welcome out to Sunday school this morning. I appreciate you coming out and joining us after a long day yesterday, intermittent rain, and getting through that. I really appreciate you coming out this morning. If you have your Bibles with me this morning, we're going to continue on in our series. We're going to be looking at today Hebrews 4. I'm going to get some scriptures handed out. Jeremy's going to get our main scripture, Hebrews 4, verse 14 through 16. And then Aileen, if you could get John 1, verse 14. Elena, Isaiah 52, verse 14. Victoria, if you could get for me Hebrews 4, verse 15 and 16. That's the second time. Sylvia, if you could find for me Proverbs 18, verse 13. Juana, if you could get Matthew 13, verse 13. Let's see here. I need someone to get Adrian, if you could get Proverbs 18, verse 2. And then we'll stop there for now. We've all heard the words, just trust me, right? That is something that either we have spoken ourselves or we have heard from someone else. And many times in life, though, we don't truly understand what that word trust means until it gets, and then we fully understand how much we were trusting someone. God has wired humanity to trust from a very early age. Children learn to trust, right? They trust their parents, even as a baby, right? Babies trust. They don't worry about things. They are careless in life because they don't need to care about certain things. They know and they trust that they're going to be taken care of. But what is trust, right? Who do we trust? Who can we trust in life? When should we trust? And more importantly, if trust has been broken in life, why can't I trust people now? Why can't I trust myself? Why and what do we do when trust is broken? How do we become trustworthy people, someone that other people can trust? And what is needed in us to become that trustworthy person? This series, again, it was inspired by a book that I've read called Trust by Dr. Henry Cloud. His subtitle of the book will be The Common Theme. Throughout this series, knowing when to give it, when to withhold it, how to earn it, and how to fix it when it gets broken. And just by some way of review, we began with an overview, and we talked about the foundation of trust. We started by looking at what is trust, and ultimately, who can we trust? But really, who can we always trust? We can always trust God. He is the foundation of trust. And then we spoke about, at a high level, the 5 elements of trust that are needed before choosing who we can trust. What are the 5 elements, before we begin this morning, what are the 5 elements of trust that we should be looking for in someone if we're going to be able to trust them? Let's do these one at a time so that everybody can get a chance. All right. What is one of the elements of trust? Carlos? Understanding. Okay. And we're going to get into that today. What are the other 4 elements of trust? Sylvia? Motives. Okay. So there's understanding, there's motives. What other elements do you think of? Maybe we're missing an element that you've thought of when you're considering this throughout the week, but specifically with these 5 elements. Anyone else? Crisita? Ability, right? There's ability. I guess you could have accountability in that, some form of accountability. And that is definitely a part of being able to trust someone, is when they're held accountable, when they are accountable. Okay, very good. What else? Aileen? Character, yes. Yep, character. Who is someone when nobody is watching them, That is truly what character is. It's what somebody is on the inside, not on the outside. Okay, and then the last one, what is that one? Number 5. You see that? Reconciling is a part of the process of being able to trust. Not necessarily one of the 5 elements of trust, but it is something that we are going to look at later on in this series. Very good. Anyone else? 5 elements of trust. Understanding, motives, ability, character, and, for extra credit this morning, track record. Okay. What is their track record? Do they have a track record of being trustworthy? So last week and the week before, we broke it up into 2 lessons. We looked at why can't I trust? And there's a number of reasons why. So let's talk about that for a moment. Why can't we trust many times? What are some of the issues, the roots of that inability to trust that we've talked about so far? Aileen? Okay, maybe they can't be trusted currently. Maybe they're lacking one of these elements of trust. And so therefore you're not able to trust them. Okay, that might be a reason why you're not able to trust. What else? What are some other possibilities why you might not be able to currently trust somebody? Okay, that person you're trying to trust now did something to you before that maybe broke trust, right? And so you've got a sunburn of broken trust. And so every time you want to trust them, there's this uneasiness, not because they're not currently trustworthy, but simply because they broke trust before. Very good. Okay, that's a possibility. What else? Biased, okay. And what kind of bias, Carlos? It could be cultural bias, right? We live in a world that many times we're raised not to trust certain types of people and races of people, right? Hispanics versus natives, Mexicans versus whoever, blacks versus whites, whites versus blacks. There's always these racial tensions, right, that are oftentimes at work, right? Many times those can be some of the reasons, those biases that we are dealing with that cause us not to be able to trust. Okay, what else? Right. Yep. Mm. Mm. Yeah, that's very possible. Absolutely, and that's a great illustration of someone that's unable to be trusted. If they're lying and you know they're lying, don't trust them, please. like you're gonna hurt yourself. You're gonna break yourself in the future, right? And so yeah, very good. That's a great illustration. Okay, what about the fact that has broken your trust in the past? Now it's somebody completely different, but there can sometimes be a struggle to trust again. It's like maybe they're the same type of person, right? Maybe it's a man, maybe it's a woman. And before, a man or a woman in your past, they broke your trust. You trusted them, but it hurt, right? And so now there's another man, another woman in your life that they're wanting you to trust them, or you're needing to trust them in some capacity. And there's a struggle, not because the person's untrustworthy, simply because someone else in your past was untrustworthy. So that's a possibility, right? So there's a number of reasons why we can't trust. So today we're going to move on. We're going to look at the fourth lesson in this series called the first element, understanding. This is the first element of trust. If we're going to be able to trust somebody, they must have understanding, and we must give them an understanding. So let's get into this today. Hebrews 4, verse 14 through 16.
Seeing then that we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God, let us fast our confession. For we do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with our weakness, but was in all points tempted as we are, yet without sin. Let us therefore come boldly to the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in time of need.
Okay, first element, understanding. Let's begin by looking at what is understanding, and let's just get a working definition of that. What is understanding? When you think of understanding, having understanding, or giving an understanding to someone, what does that mean to you? Who wants to take a shot at it? Victoria? Okay, so giving them grace, that might be part of it. Okay, what else? Okay. They understand the task, and what does that mean? Okay, so it begins with that instructions. Yes, absolutely. So if somebody has been instructed, this is what you need to do, then they should do exactly what they were told, right? If they do something completely different, then maybe the instructions weren't clear, or they just ignored them, right? Which is a strong possibility, especially when you're raising children, right? Or you're dealing with somebody that's very proud. Oh, I don't need instructions. I can figure it out. I don't need the instruction manual to put together a 10-page shed. All right? No, right? No, I need understanding. I need instruction. So yes, that is giving the understanding. Okay, so when we think about understanding, ultimately, though, we think about someone that can show empathy towards us, right? Our text shows us that there is nobody better than Jesus at having an understanding in relationship, at having sympathy towards us, at having empathy with us. Why? Because Jesus, he's walked in our shoes, right? He's not a God that never came down to mankind, right? No, he came down and he lived among us. He knows what makes humanity tick, right? He knows the struggles, the pains that we deal, the betrayals that we deal with, right? He understands the temptations. John 1, verse 14 talks about him coming down.
And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, the glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth.
Okay, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, right? Who is the Word for extra credit? Jesus. Jesus is the Word, right? He's been through not only just the temptations that we've dealt with in life, the betrayals that we've dealt with in life. He's been through greater pain than we could ever go through physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. He's been through the greatest pain. Isaiah 52, verse 14.
Just as many were astonished at you, so his visage was marred more than any man, and his form more than the sons of men.
Okay, his visage, in other words, his appearance, right? He was beaten beyond recognition, right? He was beaten so badly that no one could recognize who he was. Then he was nailed to a cross, right? And he hung there bleeding and dying in our place. The writer of Hebrews is using this as an example, right? This sympathy, this empathy that Jesus has of why we can trust in Jesus Christ. It was this understanding that he had of humanity, right? This is the first element of trust. Jesus, because he's been through what we've been through, right? Because he has an of who we are, that means he is someone that we can trust. Hebrews 4:15 through 16.
For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin. Let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace, that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in a time of need.
I love the way that the ESV puts this. In other translations, it'll say, let us therefore come boldly. I like the way ESV puts it for the sake of this lesson this morning. It says, let us then with confidence. With confidence. That word confidence, if you look it up in the Greek, it means boldness, plainly or openly. In other words, we can come to God confidently, right? We can trust in him openly, plainly, right? What is Hebrews saying here? Jesus understands us. And because he understands us, we can trust him. Because he understands us, we can have confidence in him. We can lean upon him in hard times. We can upon him for strength when enduring temptation, when going through mind battles. Why? Because he understands us and he wants to help us. So what is understanding? The word understanding, it's actually an adjective. It means to sympathetically be aware of other people's feelings, right? Jesus, he has a sympathy towards us, and he is aware of our feelings, right? He knows the battles we're dealing with in our hearts, in our minds, in our spirit, right? Another definition is the ability to comprehend something, a sympathetic awareness or tolerance. When it comes to trust, understanding is the knowing that someone you're wanting to trust, that they get you, right? They understand you. They understand where you're coming from. It's the idea that someone feels seen or heard and known, which honestly, it sounds a whole lot like empathy, right? It's a person lacking fear to be emotionally safe enough to be honest without having fear of being dismissed, right? If you're going to be able to trust somebody, you've got to have no fear of, well, whatever, right? No, you've got to be able to come to them knowing that, you know what? Okay, I might disagree with you, but let's talk about this. I'm going to hear you out. I'm going to see where you're coming from, right? And it's the entering into someone else's experience without possibly ever having been there yourself. So the question for us this morning is why? Why is understanding so critical in being able to trust someone? Because, number one, understanding is the beginning of trust. If we don't feel seen, if we don't feel heard, we don't feel known, we will struggle to trust people in life, right? If we don't feel that they're understanding where we're coming from with our heart's desire that we're wanting to trust them with, even if it's something small, right, we're going to struggle, right? They could have great motives. They could have a great character. They could have great abilities, an incredible track record, but if they're not listening to our needs, if they're not seeing what needs to be done, if they're not listening to the instructions, as Kim said earlier, about what needs to be done, or they're not getting to know us, we won't even think about the other qualities they might possess. Understanding is When someone does understand us, we're more likely to open up to them and have a close relationship with them. You think about our text, right? Jesus, he's talking, or the writer of Hebrews is talking about Jesus, right? And how we can have this closeness of relationship with him. We can come and bring our request before him, right? But that is not just in relationship with Jesus. That is also true in relationship with people. Think about it in the home, right? A wife that is understood and known by her husband is more likely to trust him with deep emotional issues that she's dealing with. A husband that is understood is more likely to trust his wife with struggles at work without the fear of her mocking him. A child that is understood by a parent is more likely to trust them and open up to them about the fears or relationships about the opposite sex. Right? In the workplace, an employee that feels they're understood by their boss is more likely to trust them with bringing problems that may arise in regards to another coworker. Right? A boss that feels they're understood by their employees may trust an employee with more responsibility. In ministry, right? In the church, a new convert may trust someone they feel can relate to them, or is simply a good listener without judging them. A believer that feels a pastor understands them personally may open up about personal issues that they need counseling on without being biased. A disciple that feels a pastor understands them may trust him to disciple them and prepare them for whatever God has for them with their best interests in mind and understanding of their goals, their dreams, their ambitions in life. A pastor that feels people understand the needs of the kingdom of God may give them greater responsibilities in the church as ministry leaders. Understanding is absolutely critical when it comes to trust. Okay, let's open up. Any questions or comments before we move on to our second point about what is understanding? Clear as mud. Jackie Ryals. Can you give her a microphone?
And I, just from her, she had expressed to me, she was involved in the ministry, and she had expressed to me just in conversation how she was very stressed because she felt like she didn't have any help. And I thought, oh, I could help you, you know. So I said, do you want me to help you? You know, I think this is something I could do. And she was like, sure. She was all excited, like, yeah, you can start next Sunday, whatever. So I started helping her. Not even like, what, like 2-3 weeks after, she kind of, I sensed that she had a little bit of an attitude towards me. And so being me, I went up to her and I was like, hey, is everything okay? And she expressed that she was like, no, it's fine, it's okay. And then I said, no, like, let's talk about it.
By the way, this is not here.
Yeah.
I know exactly what she's talking about.
I was gonna say the surprise was coming at the end. No, so I said, it's everything okay, you know, whatever. And she was like, well, and she went on saying that she felt like, I mean, she said a lot of things, but in the end, the whole conversation was she felt like I was trying to take her ministry from her. And I was like, what? No. And so I was like, absolutely, that is not what I'm trying to do. I literally just want to help you. I literally just set up and whatever and kind of stand in my corner. That was not what I wanted at all. But she was insisting that, no, you want to take my ministry. And so I was like, okay, you know what? I'm not helping anymore. Like, do you take your ministry? Like, I'm okay. Like, we're good. I'm not mad at you. Like, we're not, but I'm stepping back. I'm not helping anymore. And she, you know, continued to have a little bit of an attitude or whatever. So the misunderstanding of communication there, me to be, you know, trying to be helpful and maybe not fully me on my part explaining I'm just here to help, or I'm just, which I thought I had communicated, but maybe not enough to her. And then from her part, she maybe didn't communicate how much she wanted me to be involved or how much she wanted me to help. And so to this day, it kind of, it's been other couple things with this same person, but I think because of miscommunication, misunderstanding, I think maybe even from both parts, it kind of did something to the relationship. But anyways, that's just that. I don't know. There's no resolve there, so I don't know what.
Yes. Understanding or misunderstanding can absolutely break trust. Very good. Appreciate that comment. Anyone else? What is understanding? Any questions or comments? Okay.
Kind of like walking a mile in their shoes. What they're going through and how they're processing it, sort of. Because, I deal with a lot of teachers that I have to go talk to the superintendent or their administrator or whatever. And I almost have to kind of put myself in their position in order to do that. Because otherwise, my thinking is completely different. And they go, well, you don't know how I feel because you haven't done that. Well, but you do, because if you kind of put yourself, like you say, empathy and really strong listening and just kind of reading between the lines, because everybody's going through something.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's something I'm going to get into in this, is that to gain an understanding, you don't technically have to have been through what they've been through. Right? Well, they don't understand me. They've never been through what I've been through, so there's no way that I could trust them. That's not true, right? There's a lot of things that I've never been through, right? But I can still get an understanding, right? I can, in talking with people, I may have never been through it myself, but I've walked people through it. And so there's a lot of things that you can do to gain an understanding, right? And so that's our part in becoming someone that's trustworthy, is gaining an understanding. How can I gain an understanding so that I can be trustworthy? How can I give someone an understanding of what I'm going through? Maybe it's sharing with them specific details about what I've been through, my background, how I've handled this in the past, right? So that they are like, okay, I get it, right? They do get me. They do understand me. Okay. Yep. Sometimes you need a different perspective. Very good. Very good. Okay, let's get into this then. Let's look secondly at lacking understanding. So with all that being said about what understanding is, why would someone lack understanding? Right? Many times they lack the ability to slow down their life. Right? They lack the ability perhaps to pay attention to someone else's thoughts or feelings. Proverbs 18, verse 13.
He who answers a matter before he hears it, it is folly and shame to him.
Why would someone answer a matter before he hears it? Because they simply don't want to slow down and listen in life, right? Number two, they lack the ability to truly listen to the person they're speaking with. Rather than listening, perhaps they assume certain things about the person, and because they assume in their minds, or actually literally, they make judgment calls. The Pharisees did this with Jesus, didn't they? Right? They assumed that he was a false Christ. They assumed that he was proud. They assumed a lot of things about Jesus that were simply not true. And so, therefore, they would not listen and they would not understand. Let's look at Matthew 13, verse 13.
Therefore I speak to them in parables, because seeing they do not see, and hearing they do not hear, nor do they understand.
Very interesting. Hearing they do not hear. Jesus connects it. Nor do they understand. Right? He's saying, look, they don't understand. Why? Because they're not listening. They're not wanting to understand. Therefore, they don't understand. Sometimes while someone is speaking, rather than listening, they're thinking already about their response. Right? They've got the circle going around like you have on a computer when something is loading, right? They're listening to you, but really they're just loading. They're loading their next answer, right? And so Proverbs 18 verse 2 also talks about this.
A fool has no delight in understanding, but in expressing his own heart.
Okay. The Bible talks about someone that's rather than listening, they're thinking about their next response. A fool has no delight in understanding, but in expressing his own heart. In other words, this is someone they're thinking, okay, I want to say what I want to say. I want to say what. They're not listening. They're not getting an understanding, right? And the Bible says that is someone that is foolish. A fool has no delight in understanding. Okay, let's get some more scriptures here. I need someone to find Judges 16, verse 1. Leland, if you could find that. Luke 10, verse 40 through 42. Regina. Proverbs 18, verse 2. Again, Kim Avila. Jeremy, Proverbs 25, verse 19. Aileen, Proverbs 17, verse 9. Sylvia, James 1, verse 19. Juana, Hebrews 4, verse 16. Darius, Hebrews 4, verse 15. Let's see here. Got one more for right now. Philippians 2, verse 4. Adrian is going to get that. Okay, so let's talk about this further. So thirdly, there could be barriers preventing someone from gaining understanding, right? How many know a self-centered person will never seek to understand someone else, right? If they're all about themselves, they're not going to try to figure out the needed understanding from someone else. Rather, you're right. Why? Because they're only concerned about themselves. We'll talk more about this in our lesson about motives. Think about Samson. His parents tried to persuade him, look, you need to obey the laws of God. He comes to them. He's asking them, hey, can you get this wife for me? And they're like, why not one of the daughters of Israel? Right? But his self-centeredness kept him from understanding them. Judges 16, verse 1, we see what he did in his self-centeredness.
Now Samson went to Gaza, and saw a harlot there, and went into her.
Okay, so here his self-centeredness, how does it work out? It works out in immorality. It works out in lust. It works out in perversion, right? A self-centered person will never seek to understand someone else. A distracted person will never be able to understand someone else, right? We've all been victims of speaking with someone about the deep secrets of our heart, and then we realize that they're completely distracted by their phone, by their email, by their work, by something else. Think about Martha, right? In the very presence of God. She's in the presence of Jesus Christ. The Bible tells us she was distracted by much serving. Luke 10, verse 40 through 42.
But Martha was distracted with much serving, and she approached him and said, Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Therefore tell her to help me. And Jesus answered and said to her, Martha, Martha, you are worried and troubled about many things, but one thing is needed, and Mary has chosen that good part which will be taken away from her.
Okay, so here is Martha. Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Tell her to help me, right? What is she worried about? Herself. She's not worried necessarily about, Mary, she could really be doing a lot better in her relationship with the Lord. No, she's worried that herself, her needs aren't being met. So she's like, hey, tell her to help me. Me, right? She's self-centered, right? And so and then also it says that she's distracted, right? A distracted person won't be able to understand someone because they're only concerned, again, about themselves or about other needs. A rushed person will never be fully understanding of the person speaking to them. Someone once said that if a Pop-Tart breakfast isn't able to fit into your schedule, you're too busy. Right? Many times in life, people are rushed. Right? Everything's got to, okay, yeah, yep, yes, okay, yeah, get to the point, yeah. They're not listening. Like, I don't know about you, but if somebody's like that with me, I'm like, okay, I'll talk to somebody that can slowly talk with me. And because sometimes, I'll be honest, sometimes I have to get some stuff out, right? I gotta use some words. I'm not necessarily straight to the point as much as I would like to be. I'm working on it, right? But there's times that I just need to talk things through, to work things out, right? And for someone that's rushed, that is not acceptable to them, right? And they'll never have a full understanding of the person speaking to them. If you're rushed by someone when you need time for what you're telling them, they're going to lack a full understanding of the task at hand. I can remember working fast food. We would have to watch stupid videos for hours about any task we wanted to perform. You want to learn how to grill a burger? Go watch an hour video. It's like, come on. It's just a burger. 3.5 minutes on one side, 3.5 minutes on the other. We're good. No, we're not good. It's going to take a lot longer, right? You got to learn all the different details, right? Running the fryer and frying the French fries. You can't just drop it in there and press the button and come back when it's ready. No. There's a lot more details you need to know about this, right? Taking an order, right? Hi, how may I help you? Rather than, hey, what can I get for you? Hey, what do you want? Right? Learning how to talk with people, right? Why did we have to go through those stupid videos that I thought were stupid at the time? Because we needed an understanding. We needed instructions. Many of the kids that started working fast food, and this is no slight to anyone that works fast food, but many of the kids had never worked a job before, right? They had no sense of customer service, how to do customer service, how to talk with people nicely or politely, how to work. They had no clue about food safety, right? Many of them had been raised in homes where food safety was ramen noodles. Like, put it in the stove and figure it out on your own. Follow the instructions on the back if you have to, right? To eat them raw, right? like you, that was where they were coming from. And so they realized, no, they need an understanding. Food safety, right? There's people's lives at stake, right? You give them salmonella, they're going to be coming after you. Right? Customer safety, personal safety. I remember one young kid, 16 years old, he wasn't doing what he was supposed to be doing with the frying oil. He didn't wait for it to cool down. You know where this story's going, don't you? He carried a bucket of it and dropped it. All his skin basically peeled off on his arms. He wasn't wearing gloves. The most essential PPE that he could have been wearing, he was not wearing gloves while handling boiling hot oil. That could have been avoided, right? But he apparently missed that video, right? He ignored it. He didn't make a good decision. You know, why am I saying that? Because a rush person, if they're in a rush in life, they're going to miss details that are very important in life. A lazy person, finally, won't even try to understand someone else. Why? Because it takes work. Sometimes it takes writing some things down while somebody's talking with you. You know, there's been times where I've gone to my pastor and I'm asking him a question, and as he's talking with me, I will often tell him, I'm sorry, I'm writing it down, and he says, no problem, right? I appreciate that when someone, if I'm telling them something or giving them instructions, training them how to do something, that they're writing it down, because that's what I do. Right? I don't want to forget things. I don't want to forget details, right? And so, but the problem is a lazy person won't even try to understand. They won't even try to listen. They won't even try to pay attention to what's being told to them. This is why many times in life, if you've dealt with a lazy person, a lazy child, a lazy employee, a lazy husband, a lazy wife, whatever the case may be, a lazy anything in life, it can be very difficult to trust lazy people. When someone lacks understanding in a relationship but is trusted, I'm sure every one of us have made that mistake in life. What happens? Number one, they make foolish decisions. When you haven't taken the time to seek understanding or wisdom to think things through, foolish decisions will be made. Proverbs 18, verse 2.
A fool has no delight in understanding, but expressing in his own heart.
A fool, right? There will be foolish decisions if you don't have understanding in life, right? If you're trusted to do something and you don't have an understanding, you're going to make bad choices. Number two, someone that lacks understanding, ultimately at some point, they will break trust. Proverbs 25, verse 19.
Confidence in an unfaithful man is time of trouble. It's like a bad tooth and a foot out of joint.
In other words, it's painful, right? If you've ever trusted in somebody that is lacking understanding, they're lacking the ability to be trusted, they're like a bad tooth and a foot out of joint. Why? Because they don't understand the whys of life. They cross boundaries they didn't know were there, or because they weren't paying attention when we spoke to them, they missed the details. Because they don't understand what hurts us, maybe. They don't understand what they do or the things that they share with other people that might be hurting us. They don't understand where we're coming from in life. And thus they're saying things without empathy towards us. They break trust. Thirdly, what we find is that current relationships can be ruined. When our trust is broken and we're hurt by someone's lack of understanding or empathy, right? The relationship can be ruined. We've all been the victim of someone sharing something that we told them in confidence. You know, it's hard to trust that person again once they've violated our trust. Proverbs 17, verse 9.
He who covers a transgression seeks love, but he who repeats a matter separates friends.
Okay, so here the writer of Proverbs, he's saying, look, there are times that somebody shares something with you that is meant to be in confidence. Look, okay, you know what? I'm gonna cover that, right? In love, I'm not talking about sin, right? If it's sin that needs to be judged, that should not be covered, right? You should encourage them to get it exposed so that it can be healed, right? But there's times where there's flaws. There's times that there's things that we go through that we share with somebody that are just, it's private information. Maybe it's about our past, right? It's about things that we've been involved in the past and we're just simply wanting to open up. And, you know, if someone goes and tells all your dirty laundry to someone else, it's going to be hard to trust them in the future, right? When they didn't realize how much something means to us, the relationship, sometimes it can be completely ruined. You know, it is possible to come to a point in life that you're choosing to never trust a certain person again or open up to them again. And if you look at where did it come from, sometimes it's this very issue of understanding. Maybe you didn't give them an understanding of how much this meant to you. Maybe you didn't tell them, hey, I'm telling you this in confidence. Right? Maybe you didn't tell them how much this hurt you in the past, or this type of hurt you in the past. Right? Understanding. Finally, what it can do is that future relationships can also suffer. When someone, again, has broken our trust because they didn't understand us, it can lead to questions like, does anyone get me in life? Does anyone truly understand what I'm going through? Does anybody care about me? These are honest questions that we can begin to ask when there has been broken trust. Many times this is where insecurity, rejection, issues in deep of bitterness stem from, is simply the inability to trust people in life, lacking understanding. So let's look finally then, as we close, at how to gain understanding. First of all, how can we gain an understanding in order to be trustworthy people? How can we be like our prime example, Jesus Christ, our high priest? Number one, we must stop to listen. When is the last time you had a conversation with someone and truly listened? With your wife, with your children, with your husband, with your brother or sister in the Lord, with your coworker, your boss, your pastor. When's the last time you truly just listened? I'm putting my listening ears on. I'm going to absorb from this person. James 1:19 tells us that if we're going to be a Christian, this is what we need to do, is be a good listener.
So then, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath.
Okay, swift to hear, slow to speak. You know, many times we're the opposite, right? We're swift to speak and slow to hear, right? We turn that around. But James tells us, look, we need to be swift to hear, right? God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. There's a reason for that, right? He wants us to listen more than we speak, right? In our text, the writer of Hebrews tells us that we can come to Jesus boldly and confidently with our request. Why? Because he's ready to listen. Jesus, our example in life, he listens to our request and he's ready to respond to our requests in life. Hebrews 4:16.
Let us therefore come boldly to the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in time of need.
Okay, here we find he's saying, look, come boldly to the throne of grace. You're bringing your request to God. He's saying that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in time of need. He's ready to listen, right? Are we ready to listen in relationships of life, right? If we're going to be trustworthy people, we've got to stop and listen. Number 2, as someone said earlier, we must put ourselves in their shoes. Just because your background is different than someone else's doesn't mean you can't have empathy. Become curious about their story, where they're coming from. Ask questions to clarify and get greater understanding of them as a person, or perhaps of the task they're asking you to perform. Why do we do that? Help me to better understand what you mean by that. What would happen if, right? Ask questions. Show them that even if you disagree with them, that you understand where they're coming from. Simply acknowledging someone's perspective can help to open the door to trust with people. Letting them know, you know what, I hear you. I get it. I completely understand where you're coming from. Right? Letting them know that they're being heard enables them to hear what you have to say. Right? In relationship, Jesus literally put himself in the shoes of a human being. Hebrews 4:15.
For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who in every one who in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin.
Okay, so he put himself in our shoes. Thirdly, remove the barriers to understanding in our lives. Stop being self-centered. Allow God to change you into someone that looks out for others. Philippians 2, verse 4.
Let each of you look out not only for his own interests, but also for the interests of others.
Okay, so here Paul is speaking to the Philippian church. He's saying, look, stop being self-centered. Look out for other people, right? If you'll begin looking out for other people, you'll become someone that is full of understanding, full of empathy and sympathy, right? Give someone your full attention when they're speaking to you rather than being constantly distracted, right? Children and spouses are great at letting us know when we're distracted, aren't they? I can remember one of my daughters some time ago coming to me, and she began to talk with me. But if I'm honest, I wasn't really listening. I was distracted doing some work. She grabbed me with both hands by the face and pointed me right at her and said, "Daddy, you're not listening to me." Right? You've got to stop. When someone's trying to speak to you, you've got to stop and listen to them. Right? Give them the time of day. They're worth it. They're worth your time. Right? The relationship with them is worth your time. If you want to be trusted, let people know they have your attention. It's possible. Right? You may have to tell them to wait to speak until you can give them your full attention. Maybe you are in the middle of something. Right? You know what? I want to talk with you about that. Can you give me a few minutes? Let me finish this up, and then I will give you my full attention. That's okay, right? That's helping them to see, you know what? What they're saying is important, but you're doing something right now that can't be stopped. But you are going to give them your attention. That's okay. Sometimes you simply just need to slow down in life. Stop rushing through life so much. Slow down. Right? Jesus slowed down eternity to step out of heaven and live 33 years amongst us. God Almighty, right, stepped out of heaven, came and lived among mankind. Surely we can slow our lives down enough to be able to understand the people in our lives that are trusting us. So the question is, then on the other hand, how can we make sure that someone understands us before choosing to trust them? Number one, we must slow down in making a decision to trust someone. If you're in a rush, you'll make poor trust decisions just as much as the person you're trusting if they are in a rush. So slow down. Give yourself time to observe the person to see if they truly understand you and your needs that you're wanting to trust them with, right? Number two, ask them if they understand and then listen to their response to see if they really do or not. Have them repeat it back to you, what you just told them, right? I'll do this with my children when I'm asking them to do something new or again. If they don't have a full understanding, perhaps, clarify so that you know that they understand you fully before you choose to trust them. Thirdly, take baby steps in trust. Trust in increments as you see understanding grow. Right? This is why in a marriage relationship, you shouldn't get married the day after you start dating, because they don't know you yet. They don't understand you yet. Right? You need to see if the other person fully understands you or not. Jesus tells us that trust always comes in levels and tests. Luke 16:10 says, "He who is faithful in what is least is faithful also in much, and he who is unjust in what is least is unjust also in much." In our relationship with God, who again can always be trusted, he tells us in certain areas, right, to test him, right? In money, he tells us, try me now in this. See that I can be trusted, right? At the end of the day, it's important to know that God can help us in the arena of understanding. He can help us to know that God knows and understands us. He can help us to become people that are understanding, and also to give understanding to people that we need to be able to trust in life. That's all the time that we have this morning. We're going to start service at 10:30. Thank you so much for coming out to Sunday school this morning. God bless you.